Welcome to Thursday, January 30th, 2025. Just one more day left in the month of January. January started off cold, got colder, ending a little bit more on the mild side of things over the last few days, and that'll continue for some of you today. But certainly it's been cold enough to completely ice up things finally, as you can see there, for a view from the shores of Lake McConaughey. We're going to be watching some snow and rain move across portions of eastern Colorado. A rain-snow mix across portions of Kansas and into the central United States as that upper level low out of the southwestern United States kicks out of the region. Elsewhere, especially the northern areas, another decent day. Boy, it's been nice over the last few days. And while the wind will be a little bit more prominent in some areas today, it's still going to be for late January a nice day again. The big contrast we talked about yesterday with air masses over the Pacific Northwest, Canada, the western United States, is this going to be in a big tug of war this weekend into early next week between the Pacific and the Arctic. And when you put those two together, they don't get along very well and they cause a lot of weather. And we're going to see that in some areas this weekend. And as we alluded to yesterday, this does not lead to a high confidence forecast situation. So sometimes you're just more confident, and other times you're a little bit less confident. A lot of that has to do with just this big contrast in air masses battling together. You put that over the complex terrain of the western United States, and you can have a high variation, and really you can have a lot of busted forecasts in this situation. And this is especially true east of the divide in those locations I just mentioned there. Heavy mountain snows are coming. We are going to see enough snow fall in some of the Pacific Northwest and northern Rockies that we'll be talking about avalanche danger in about 5 days or so, as we're going to see a lot of snow pile up on some crusty snow surfaces. This will be especially true in the northern areas. Potentially, we might see a good old atmospheric river setting up. Haven't heard that here lately, but looks like we've got one setting up, and we're in a pattern that may favor more atmospheric river formations in the long term. We'll talk about that. Beautiful shot there out of South Park. Very icy conditions. The nights have been very cold in the western basins and valleys, and that'll continue here for another night or two before that Pacific air moves in. And with snow cover in those western basins and valleys, a little bit harder for the deer to find a meal, but it looks like they're doing pretty good here so far. The satellite image this morning shows the upper level low coming out of New Mexico. You can see the cloud shield. Then on the back side of it, we're going to get some snowfall today and rain, thunderstorm activity developing out ahead of it. High pressure continues to bring fair weather conditions over a large part of the Intermountain West, from the West Coast to the Pacific Northwest to the Northern Plains. But this will be changing. Here's a shot of radar this morning. So you can see there's that band of light to moderate snowfall on the northwest edge of that upper level low as it kicks out. And you'll see rain fill into these areas here, north edge getting some snow as it lifts on out. Right now, across the United States, this is where we have advisories for bad weather. We have some flood warnings and advisories in effect out here. Here are some winter weather advisories for some snowfall in those purple and pink areas. The winds are going to be picking up, so the I-25, I-80 corridor areas of Wyoming, especially tomorrow, we're going to see the wind pick up as the changes out here develop. And you can see all the blue and the pink back here. This is for the anticipation of the snow and the wind to be developing, really getting going late Friday, but especially as we get into the weekend there. So you can see the western side of Wyoming, you're going to have winter weather advisories, and these could go for multiple days, as you'll see in a minute. This is a classic Pacific setup where the western mountains get the bulk of the precipitation. You get east of the mountains, there's not as much left. However, if the Arctic air gets a push further south, that could change. We'll show you that here in a second. So here we are, the 500 millibar pattern today. The low kicking out. Strong jet stream winds, though, developing. We showed you an animation of this yesterday, and we're still seeing that. This is just a powerful push of strong upper level winds coming in off the west coast, streaking through the Cascades, the Northern Rockies, into Yellowstone Park here, into Jackson. And this is just like a straw, sucking moisture from the Pacific and pushing it into the mountain ranges here. So this is by Saturday morning. So you're going to see very strong winds aloft developing up top. Down on the surface, close to the ground, Arctic air is going to be oozing in from the north, and hence the contrast of air masses helping to develop that very strong jet stream wind. When we look at the forecast for precipitation between now and the end of Friday, it looks like this. You can see the southern low bringing very wet weather to a lot of the nation as it picks up moisture. Here's the Pacific Northwest starting to get wet. And by Friday afternoon, snow showers into Yellowstone Park, the northwest parts of Wyoming and eastern Idaho starting to see snow showers move in. While we see this moisture getting deeper and the winds aloft getting more intense, you'll see this area grow and expand eastward. So between now and late Friday, it looks like this. But as we get into the weekend, this is by Sunday, we have that continued flow of air over the water, comes back off the water, right into land, driving that Pacific moisture in, just forcing it in. And this is what the precipitation looks like between now and Tuesday. So you can see very heavy precipitation in the central and northern Sierra Nevada. We're looking at significant moisture getting east of the Cascades. A lot of times the Cascades get all of it. But you can see there's another area right here of heavier precipitation that is able to get over the Cascades. Just it's getting forced over. So we're going to see very heavy snows in the mountains of northwestern Wyoming and eastern Idaho, the mountains of western Montana. And then we talked about this overrunning area of snow where the Arctic air from the north comes in and is overrun by the Pacific moisture. We see another band of snow up here in Canada like this. We're still just a little nervous about this area right here. You can see there's now a little bit of precipitation showing up in that area across parts of central and eastern Wyoming, getting into the panhandle of Nebraska and a good part of South Dakota. We're nervous about this because this band of moisture could end up going further south. It could wiggle a little bit, so that gives us some pause. And we'll show you the difference in the modeling and why we were still a little nervous. The European model's it's like someone took a ruler and just drew a line there and says, okay, the Arctic air stops there. So north of the Arctic air, we're going to get the snow from the overrunning right up here, while the mountains get moisture and Pacific air floods the zone here, bringing those very warm and mild temperatures west of the divide. But the GFS model is much further south and much heavier with the snow. Is the European likely to be more right, or the GFS? You know, right now, either solution is plausible, but boy, there's a huge difference. Look at that. A lot of snow in Montana? Not a lot of snow in Montana. A lot of snow in South Dakota? Not much snow in South Dakota. So we'll have to see. And the reason for this is that Arctic air very close to the ground forms, and it's not really thick. It's a very thin layer of air. And when you take that thin layer of air, you try to move it through the complex terrain, the models have a difficult time kind of keeping track of it because it's a smaller target. It's a smaller target, and the resolution vertically of the models has a hard time picking some of that up. So we have to keep an eye on this. This is especially true in the Sunday through Tuesday time frame. Look at the heavy snow. We'll talk about this in a little bit for the mountains of California. So here's the big contrast of air masses we showed you yesterday. This is for around noontime on Monday. The Arctic air stays locked up in Montana, the Dakotas, and northern Wyoming, but there's very warm air from the Pacific pushing against it and keeping areas along and west of the divide with much above average temperatures. But the cold, look at the cold leaks all the way down here into northern California, and it gets quite cold relative to average into Seattle and Portland. So you can see where the Arctic air wants to penetrate and go through. The European model wants to stop it right along the Pine Ridge, basically, as you get from Alliance and Chadron over to Lusk and points north by Monday. The GFS model pushes it all the way to the Palmer Divide. So there's quite a bit of distance here, quite a bit of difference between the solutions. We'll just have to watch it. We just have to get a little bit closer. But this area right here, you're either going to be in the 40s and 50s, or you're going to be a lot colder with snow. We'll just have to see that. As we look at where we're going to be next Tuesday, this is by the 4th, the pattern is basically stagnant. We talked about the omega pattern, so it stays stuck right there. That will just continue to pump moisture into the Pacific Northwest and Northern Rockies for more snow. This is why it's going to really pile up in the far western mountains. Eventually, what's going to happen? This pocket of cold, moist air and strong jet stream winds is going to sag slowly south. This is what could set up a bit of an atmospheric river pattern. So this is Tuesday. By Wednesday, you see it starts to move south, and we start to see the stronger jet stream winds push further south. This is going to come right over the water and bring that air, that moist air off the Pacific, drive it into the west, and the cold air, since there's a slight southward shift, starts to push further south. These are the jet stream winds by Thursday morning. So instead of those strong jet stream winds being up here, they're down here, going more into central California than the central Great Basin into the central Rockies. And notice the strong jet stream winds go west to east, further out in the Pacific, north of Hawaii, coming on in. So this could drive more water, higher water content air into the west by the middle of next week. And that's going to push the snow and the cold gradually, not rapidly, but further south. So this is for the 5-day period of Monday through Friday of next week. So you can see it's getting further south, and it may end up further south than this, but there's going to be a lot of water getting thrown into the Sierra. This is going to produce what could be a lot of snow and significant rains in central and northern California, then spreading east across the Rockies. Again, this axis could be down here, could be a little bit more north, but it's going to be shifting further south. When you put it all together, between now and the 8th of February, or between now and next Saturday, you can see a bullseye of heavy precipitation here. And if you focus in a little bit, this is probably overdoing it. But you can see nearly 18 inches of water content in areas in the mountains west of Tahoe there. We haven't seen that really yet this winter, an event like this. This is a good old-fashioned atmospheric river. Convert that to snowfall, and you're getting over 100 inches of snow, potentially over a 2-week period. Could that be overdoing it? Yeah, absolutely. But it bears watching, let's put it that way. Then we look at the colder air. This is by next Saturday. See how the colder air is able to push further south? So it comes back in. So for those of you disheartened by it getting real warm here over the next few days here, it's not necessarily going to last. It's likely not going to. That Arctic air is going to want to push in and get further south and west by the middle to the end of next week, and certainly by next weekend. And then longer term, we start to see the reestablishment of the high, and we start to get a pattern like this again. This is by next Friday into the weekend. That allows that colder air in that we showed you right here. Further out, by the 11th of February, the high gets very robust and very strong here in the Gulf of Alaska. If that happens, well, here we go. We start to get a very strong cross-latitude flow of air again into the U.S. So, despite our January thaw here we're experiencing right now, it may actually set the stage. What we're going through right now may set the stage for another push of very cold air into the U.S. as we get after the 10th of February. And if you look at the temperatures by then across the lower 48, we have a very cold look of below average temperatures again across all of the lower 48. So we may have another situation that is somewhat similar to that we had in January with an Arctic outbreak. We'll just have to wait and see how things unfold. But there's a lot of weather going on between now and the next couple of weeks, so buckle up. Have yourself a good Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow.